right, hello everyone, and welcome to another workshop Wednesday. My name is Mike Stratton. I am a systems engineer here at Verify, and I will be your host for today's workshop. Today we are joined by Matt Sykes. How's it going, Matt?
Hey Mike, how are you, buddy?
Good, good, thank you. Matt is going to show you how to migrate from your Linux OVA to a Microsoft SQL Server environment. First, we'll get started with the agenda. Quick overview of our company and what we do. Next, Matt will go over how to migrate your Linux OVA to a Microsoft SQL Server environment. Then we'll pause for some Q&A and get any of your questions answered. And then during the demo, if you have any questions, make sure to ask them in the Q&A panel in the bottom right corner of your screen. After Q&A, we will reward one lucky attendee a $50 Amazon gift card. So hang around to see if you've won. Quick overview of Verify. Verify is the preferred analytics and management solution for Cisco collaboration. We provide industry-leading CDR, UCCX, and Cube call analytics, customizable dashboards and widgets, remote phone control, and change management. But today we're kind of focusing on the overall kind of system maintenance, kind of behind-the-scenes stuff with our OVA. And last but not least, for those looking for a more hands-off Verify experience, we do offer a managed consulting service. This is a service that provides a dedicated Verify SE to you to do all the heavy lifting, giving you and your users a completely hands-off experience. Think of us as an extension of your organization. It provides upgrades, one-on-one training, report, dashboard building, or really anything you need. Your dedicated Verify systems engineer has you covered. The only thing you have to do is give us a call or send us an email. So if you want any additional information on our ECS service, feel free to reach out to your account manager, and we'd be happy to see if ECS is right for you. So with all that said, I am going to pass the ball to Matt, and Matt, take it away.
Okay, buttons and pull this header out of the way. Okay, hello all, Matt Sykes here with Verify. As Mike had just set the table here, we're going to walk through on this workshop how to migrate a Verify Linux OVA system to a Windows server, potentially using a Microsoft SQL Server. Now, I do want everyone's eyes to capture this announcement of the day widget I have here on the top of this Linux lab of mine. We cannot migrate MySQL databases that are native to the Verify Linux OVA into Microsoft SQL servers. We don't support it. I'm certain at a certain guru level it can be done. However, we do not support it. It's not easy to even try. So let's kind of get that out of the way, just put that disclaimer out there. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to illustrate and kind of demonstrate here exactly how to take this this .180 Verify Linux lab of mine here and go ahead and migrate over to a Windows box that I have. I already have a Windows RDP open here with a shell installer of the Verify Windows installer here. So we'll get to that in a moment. So what we're going to need here, there's going to be a few things. I'll be kind of combing back and forth here. But one thing I would certainly probably recommend would be to upgrade your current Verify Linux environment to our current GA. Right now, as of September 14th, 2022, our current GA is 12.4.3. However, 13.0 is a couple days away. So I'm just pointing that out for the purpose of this recording. But definitely, if we're going to migrate, one Verify system to another, I would certainly recommend updating the initial one to the current GA. So that way, when you're loading the new Windows installer for Verify on a new server, they'll be in parallel with one another. Certainly, there's there's limited potential, maybe fault that can happen here, but I like to keep them on parallel levels just to make sure that there's no DLLs or any configuration files that could be of consequence. So just keep them even in parallel, and it should be pretty straightforward. So the main things that we will need to identify here will be, one, we'll need to download a new Windows installer of Verify on a Windows server. That's the first start. Then what we'll need to do is we'll need to grab the configuration database off of this Windows lab, this Verify Linux lab of mine here. And then once we migrate that database configuration file on over, that will contain everything. That will contain all your dashboards, all your users, all your authentication controls, pretty much everything that's in this configuration kind of hover out here. So all the cluster definitions, all of your application settings, all your user auths, your SSOs, your AD servers, your email recipients, your chat bots, logos, everything comes over in this configuration database that we're going to pull over in a second or two. So First things first will be to go ahead and get an installer ran, pull over the configuration database file, then restore it there, and then go ahead and turn on some other bells and whistles, but mainly change all of the directory paths from Linux speak to Windows speak. So we're going to kind of comb through that right now. So for brevity's sake, for this demonstration here, I've gone ahead and loaded some things on this Windows server right here. I did load a very shell 12.4.3 instance of Windows installer for Verify here on this lab, and we'll talk about some other components in a moment. But just to show everyone's eyes here real briefly, I'll log in with I threw in a license key as well. Okay, I'll admit that. So we'll also need your Verify license key. If you don't have one, certainly reach out to Verify support or support@verify.com to get a copy of it, or your account manager here at Verify. So I'm just kind of browsing in here real briefly just to kind of show you that this is a complete shell. I have nothing to find. There are no configurations. There are no clusters set up. And even the call manager one is disabled. There is no publisher IP, et cetera, et cetera. There's no log analysis. So complete shell, as I had mentioned here. So first things first that we'll need to do is what we'll want to do is go to the current system, I wouldn't necessarily call it production, but the current Linux OVA of Verify. What we'll want to do is we'll want to use probably an SFTP client would maybe the easiest. What I'll want to do, excuse me, is quick connect to it onto this .180 here. What I'll need to do is I'll need to pull out the configuration database that houses all of the system settings, like I mentioned. That can be found down yonder in opt verify apps insight db h2. Here we go. Okay, so this directory path right here is where the configuration database is going to live. Let's maximize this real briefly. The database configuration file name is called insight.mv.db. So I'm just going to actually just download this real briefly to, I don't know, my music directory, since there's nothing in there, I guess. I'll just download this. This has all the configurations, as I mentioned, for my Linux OVA system here. There is the 2K file. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pull this on over to that RDP, and then we're going to load it into that shell instance of that Windows box of Verify and turn it on. So I will just do this. Where is my music directory? Here it is. This is fresh. So I'm going to copy this guy right over, copy him, I'll pull the RDP over. Let's get some of these browser tabs out of the way. I'll just toss it right on the desktop here real plainly. Now, within the Windows installation of Verify, there is a different application install directory. Obviously, it's going to be Windows Speak. So let me go ahead and just kind of navigate to that and show you kind of where that's at. So on my system here, I'm using just the local C drive. Certainly, you could have other drives that you're installing us on. It's completely fine. But from whatever drive we're on, we'll be underneath the program files. You'll find a Verify Insight directory. And then the same kind of one that we had on the Linux will be going into the DB. There'll be an H2 directory. Inside that will be the insight.mv.db. So now, since this is on my Windows box here, and this is a brand new Windows installation, this is pretty much, once again, just a shell. There's nothing really in this whatsoever, except for just very basic stuff for the application to function. So what I'm going to do here is I'll need to stop the service. So let me just go ahead and just go into the Windows Service Manager. I will go ahead and just stop the service real quickly. Then what I'll go ahead and do, since you'll need to be an administrator on the server, of course. I'm just going to rename it real briefly. I'll just throw I don't know, a .old on the back end, for instance. I will copy the copy from my Linux lab on over, ingest it right into this directory here. Yes, I am. Okay, so this is now the running configuration database once I turn the service back on. And that should, once again, have all the configurations for my Verify Linux instance over here in Windows. However, it'll still have all the corresponding directory paths in Linux speak. So we'll need to swap all of those out in a moment or two. So starting up the Windows service here for Verify Insight. Now on a Windows machine, it'll probably take 60 to 90 seconds for the UI to come back up. Linux is a little shorter than a minute. So we'll just browse this for a moment or two and just wait here for a second. So as I had made mention, we'll want to go ahead and update all these directory paths. So that's definitely one thing that we're going to comb through here in a moment or two once I get my login prompt. Everything comes over, all my logins. Now in my Linux one, I pretty much had everything defaulted, just using an admin account, but certainly if this was a production system and I would have all my user accounts, my corresponding, maybe my local MAT user, for instance, certainly would be able to get me in the front door of this Windows installation based off of the configuration database we just pulled over, installed, if you will, and restarted that service. So I should get the landing page here in a moment or two. And then we can dive through all of the directory paths that will need to be updated. And we can do all that through the UX here. And the nice thing about it is that I don't need to manually go into, File Explorer on this Windows box here and go ahead and manually create all of these directory paths. The UI will do it for us. Just so happens I have the same admin account, but what we'll see here will be remnants, if you will, of my Linux environment or my Linux system. So I can certainly go into, it should default to my analytics. Yes, should reference, yes, Chicago was my cluster in my Linux lab here, pointing at a database that was in local MySQL, which obviously there's no MySQL on this box, or at least there shouldn't be. And we're using a root account. So we definitely know we'll need to update the database information. We'll get to that in a few moments. That's down the checklist. But I just kind of want to show your eyes here real briefly that everything came over. So I'll go into my clusters real briefly here. Everything will be deactivated or suspended. So here's the definition of my UCM from my Linux environment here, pointing at, once again, here's a Linux path with a little sliver of some Windows in there, but pointing at a local MySQL database engine. That doesn't exist, but all this configuration came over in that H2 database configuration file. So what we'll need to do now is just go ahead and start changing paths so that they're of the Windows variety and not the Linux variety. So the first place we're going to want to start, at least in my estimation, would be, let's go right to the application settings. So we'll navigate to the settings gear here in the upper right, let the hover out come over, or if it doesn't, it should give you the kind of the white backgrounding screen. But still you can go into system, go into application settings, and we'll need to update everything from Linux to Windows. So knowing that on my the Windows environment here. So the corresponding directory path for everything, I'll just go ahead and throw on my clipboard here real quickly. So I'm on my local drive, program files, go down to Verify Insight. This pretty much is the install path. And there's obviously tertiary directories underneath this, but we don't need to get into those right now. So what we'll need to look at here, all the application settings would have came over. I didn't have any email recipients defined in that Linux lab of mine, but they certainly would have carried over. But definitely what did carry over is the Linux directory paths. So we'll want to swap those out. This is going to be the main CDR processing directory here. So I definitely want to update this root directory. And we'll go ahead with the Windows speak of it, if you will. I do believe I have a corresponding CDR directory, which is pretty much where I'm going to want to write everything. So I should have pulled that on here too. So I'll just throw that on there, CDR. So that will be the root directory. That also should be one of the home directories, definitely, that the SFTP server is utilizing, or FTP server. We'll get to that in a couple moments as well. So we'll need to update the root directory for the CDR processings. Any of the other paths that you'll see, and they'll jump right off the page at you. So right here, the corresponding, repository settings for the cluster styles. That's CUCM, that's UCCX, and Cube. So I'll just need to go ahead and update this a little bit. And I will just grab the old Linux path that I'm just going to paste over with what's on my clipboard. Still, we have forward slashes because it's in it's still, that's the remnants of the Linux speak here. But let me just kind of segue where this would be going down to. There is a corresponding repository directory here, and there's a reports directory within there, and some corresponding folders for the applicable nodes that we're entertaining here. So all I really need to do here, since these already exist, I just need to flip the slashes. So I've got my application directory path here. Let's just go and put the Windows backslashes in so all of this can communicate properly, because I'm sure the logs will start complaining about that in the background eventually. So just update that. Same deal here. Excuse me. Swap out that installation path with the Windows path. Turn some forward slashes into backslashes. A little monotonous, but bear with me. We'll get to something interesting and entertaining in a moment. All right, and Cube. Take that one as well. Forward to back. Okay, what else do I have in here? And everything else should be fine. These directories obviously are of the Windows variety that we know. Certainly if I had, system alert recipients, certainly they would be in here. But this, once again, this is a Linux lab of mine that I brought over. So on the Windows variety now, I have updated all of these repositories and the CDR paths to their Windows speak, if you will. So now I can go ahead and hit save on this. What that'll then do is that'll actually give me the access to be able to point and activate the call manager or the cube clusters within this Windows instance of Verify now. So we'll go back to the settings here in the upper right. We'll be heading to database servers in a moment, but I think we first want to go ahead and get the CUCM cluster paths and the cube paths, all that taken care of. So we're going to go underneath clusters. We'll start with CUCM. And here is my suspended cluster that came over from the Linux lab here. Okay, we can still see / there too, but once again, we've already cleaned up the root. That's why the root is here and good for us. All I need to do is update the directory underneath the call manager cluster here within Verify. So we'll go ahead and edit this, as well as my eyes saw it at the very end, but the audit log. So if your system is utilizing our audit or our change management module, you'll also want to update those as well. And we're going to do that right now too. So just from top down here, all this information should remain the same. This is my UCM server. This is my login. The password does not need to be redefined. It's in that H2 database. So we're fine there. What I need to do is I need to update the directory path for the Chicago cluster to something once again, in Windows speak. So it could be something simple as cluster 1. I could maybe just flip the slashes and maybe I'm fine with that. Or maybe I just want to polish that to be something more specific for the cluster it's entertaining. It's really a preference of the admin who's doing this work. Okay, so once again, also it's still reading that there's a local MySQL database engine here, and I don't have, and in this example here, we're going to go towards Microsoft SQL here with this database environment. So once again, I don't have a database server here that's going to warrant that for me. So we'll leave that alone just for now. We're going to come back to that in a few moments, though, once we update the database servers. So there's no other paths in here to update except for the ones for log analysis at the bottom of the clusters. So whether that's UCCX, Unity, or CUCM, these are going to be applicable for the change management module. So if you do not have it, then this is kind of moot for you, and we'll update you in a few moments. So if the directory path is on my clipboard anymore, let's just go ahead and insert that in here. All right, so there it is. I will take out the corresponding data directories that we don't need. And actually, as a matter of fact, I'll probably just do this. This may just be easier. Since I'm writing the data to cluster 1, I'm just going to build a corresponding log files right next to it. So let's just add that in there. CDR. Well, I'm missing a slash. Insight cluster 1 CDR. Okay. Oh, no. Logs. Excuse me. There we go. So now this, once I go ahead and save this, and then activate the cluster, once I'm ready to activate the cluster, then I'll be able to go ahead and it'll automatically build those additional log analysis directories for me, the call manager or the cube data directories for me as well. But we need to go ahead and identify the database engine here next. So let's actually comb on up there and go take a peek at the database here. Well, you know what, before we get to the database server settings, let me just run through the other clusters. So these need their paths updated as well. So I have two UCCX clusters here on this server as well, on this instance here. But once again, at the very bottom of this, you'll find, once again, the log analysis for the change management piece. So we'll just need to go ahead and update accordingly. Of course, I copied the wrong piece. I'll just type it out. Verify insight / whatever I want to be. How about UCCX, and then this has changed a few slashes. Once again, just kind of flipping from Linux speak to Windows, and then we'll go ahead and save that. That would be then corresponding there, so that we can route our TMT audit logs down to those directory paths, and we'll get to that towards the end. Same manipulations are going to exist for Unity as well. I don't have a Unity cluster set up on either one of these machines, but if we had one, just for example purposes, that would be centered around the change management module as well, but there is a log analysis directory for this. So if you are utilizing a Unity cluster within Verify for change management, you'll also need to update the Unity cluster's log analysis directory. Okay. Same pairs true for Cube. This guy is suspended as well. We'll need to, this has already been updated because I inputted that. Okay, very well. So this actually kind of breadcrumbed for me, so that was nice to see. But once again, there are no audit logs for Cube. I'm certainly just checking this just to make sure that this is in Windows and is no longer in Linux speak. So okay, so we're fine there with, I suppose, the cluster directory paths and, their naming conventions and those slashes. So next where I want to go will be the database servers. So coming from a Linux OVA where we have the local MySQL embedded into that OVA, once again, it is not compatible with a migration into a Microsoft SQL Server environment. Now, so what we would need on this, either this .201 Windows server or if there's an existing Microsoft SQL Server that we can point to, we'll need to go ahead and add it in here. Now, the other night, I actually did load a Microsoft SQL Express 2019 version onto this Windows box here, and that's what we're going to use. So I'm just deleting my MySQL database definitions here that came over with that configuration database, and then we're going to go ahead and add a brand new one. So I'll call this, where are all my breadcrumbs? My SQL Server should be fine. We definitely want to change the type to be Microsoft. Microsoft SQL Server by default is going to use port 1433. If you're using an instance name on maybe a non-local database engine for Microsoft SQL, certainly go ahead and input that there. But I'm not using a named instance here on this lab here. Then we'll need to go ahead and polish either using NTAuth or SQL authentication. I have taken the onus on myself to go ahead and create mixed mode authentication, but I am going to use a SQL authenticated account here for this. So I'll just go ahead and input what my SA password is. We'll go ahead and save this. Now I have a good database engine that I'm pretty sure is communicatable, we'll say. So let's actually now jump back to the Call Manager clusters or the Cube clusters as well. We'll do both of them real briefly. I'm not going to ingest any live data into them, but we'll see all the flow here. So it is disabled. We'll need to go ahead. Why is it? And it's not giving us the activation button. Well, it's doing that because I've blown out the MySQL definitions from the database server section. So now if I scroll down, the only one that's left is the MS SQL server that we just defined that is local to this machine here. Certainly if it's a different one, configurations in the last step would need to be tinkered a little more. But all I need to do here is just give myself a database name that I want to assign for this the Chicago cluster. So maybe I just call it something along the lines of Chicago DB, for instance. The purge, I don't have my any retention settings really set, so I've got the keep forever flags on. From your production environments, certainly your 12 months, your 18 months, your 36 months will come over in the H2 configuration file as well as your monitoring enables and all of that good stuff. So we've already updated all these paths. All we need to do is just update that SQL database name off the new engine. We'll go ahead and save it. On the next screen, I'll have the option to go ahead and activate this cluster. All right, so now we can go ahead and activate it. This will prove that I can communicate with the local Microsoft SQL engine here. We shall check the database. There's Microsoft SQL on 1433 on the local host. I am using SA. I'm calling the database name Chicago_DB. It does not recognize one, obviously, because it's a brand new SQL instance. So I'm going to go ahead and create that shell database. And I should be able to activate it. And voila, there we go. Okay, so the cluster is enabled. However, its status is idle. Now it's going to be waiting for call manager data to get delivered to this directory path that the processor is going to sniff every 2 to 5 minutes for any data insertions into the SQL backend. So we're good here with this call manager cluster. If you had multiples, obviously just rinse and repeat. Same rules would apply for Cube, but they don't for contact center, and I'll show you why in a moment. So we'll edit the Cube cluster here real briefly. Same rules should apply that I need to specify the SQL database engine, and we'll just call this for example purposes as CubeDB. Go ahead and save that. And now on the next page, I'll have the option, just like I had with the call manager, to go ahead and activate this cluster and create a brand new database in the Microsoft SQL Server. Check database, it doesn't exist. Do you wish to create it? Yes, I do. Okay, it's created. Do you wish to activate it? Yes, I do. So once again, current status, green and idle. So we just need to go ahead and probably update the Cube job. So it's now pointing over to this new server as opposed to my .180 or my Linux lab. So now we have a call manager and a Cube cluster that are up. Contact center, you get easy with this one because we don't house this data in our databases. It lives in Informix, and we should be able to read it from here. So all I should need to do is just go ahead and run some cluster checks, and I should be able to signify that I can communicate with my real-time UCCX on this IP for this many agents, et cetera, et cetera. So all that should already pair true for me. So let's see, what else do I have? We created those 2 clusters. Aha, the next thing that we'll need to do, so since this is a kind of a, we'll just assume this is a brand new Windows box here, there's no FTP or SFTP server to accept the data deliveries from Cube and or CUCM. So an FTP/SFTP server will need to be installed locally on the server so they can accept those files. Now on this lab here, I'm not going to walk through every bit and piece of this, but I defined or installed a FileZilla server here, created a user called verify, pointing down to that directory path for the call manager, if it'll let me in there, all the way down to the CDR directory. Okay, perfect. So that's going to send or accept data files off the virtual path of the /. So that's what we'll need to define in call manager. So at that point, what I would kind of do would be to get the SFTP server installed, create some users for the amount of call managers that you have or the amount of cubes that you have, so they're siloed to one another. And then once that's up and running, certainly you can obviously play with the ports and the protocol encryptions. But definitely once that's solidified, then you can easily just jump back over to call manager. I think I've got it right here. So within call manager, of course, it needs me to log back in. We'll need to go to the serviceability page. And then with underneath serviceability, we shall need to probably delete and recreate a CDR billing application server param. Of course, my spelling is being taken to task right now. Here we are. Okay, so in the serviceability page, underneath tools, CDR management will be the application or the billing application server params. So this one, even though it wasn't pointing to my .180, assume it was my old Linux lab. What we would need to do, we'll just pick on this 23. I'm not going to delete it, but assume this was my .180 Linux lab. We'll want to delete that, and we'll want to add a new, but there's only up to 3 slots can have, so that's why it's grayed out at the moment. But then create the new billing application server param to point down to the corresponding /. Actually, it'll be a / on that one because I've specified FileZilla to its virtual and its native path to route to the corresponding directory where I want to see that CDR, which should be right in here eventually. But I'm not going to turn that on just yet. So once that is solidified and the clusters are activated, the SFTP server is loaded, the users are created, the home directories are created, we point call manager and Cube over to the new instance. Now within Cube, what you'll need to do, if you're using Cube within Verify Analytics, what we'll need to do, since it's kind of a one-way blind FTP transfer, what we'll need to do is we'll need to go into the Cube and we'll need to kind of null out the configurations for that job and then go ahead and redefine them so they're pointing to the new corresponding server that we want to point that data to. I don't think we would really want to update that job. We'd probably just want to null it out and recreate it so it's pointing to the new server, new Windows machine with the corresponding end user, with the corresponding user account, so that it solidifies with the FTP server and then drops its data off into the Cube directory every hour. Okay. Let's see, what else do I have here? Okay, we've got that. Certainly you want to confirm once you define the billing application server parameters within call manager or set up the GW accounting file job within Cube, you'll want to validate that files are being delivered from those nodes into the new Verify Windows server and into these corresponding directories. Then from there, you can definitely dive into the analytics off of the Aqua module right here, number 2, and it should default us to the history search in a moment or two. And then from there, what I'd be able to do is I'd be able to kind of quick search whatever I needed to. Now, these are shell databases, so I haven't ingested any data into them. They were just created, so there is no visible data. So now in this instance, which is going to be very normal, because we cannot migrate the MySQL databases into MS SQL. So what we would probably recommend doing would be to either take a data dump out of Call Manager in the serviceability page using the CAR tool. Or what you could do is, if your Verify Linux instance is storing the archive data files, we should actually have them cached away somewhere. So if that archiving is turned on, they should actually be tucked in underneath the CDR branch where the Linux server was accepting data from the call manager or from the cubes, but they should be in the processed past tense directory. So if you needed to, for instance, this is why There's only a handful here because this is a lab environment. But on SEP 12 here, when I was playing around with stuff, I definitely had a lot of data loaded. Certainly, this could be what you may need to pull over, copy over, or to zip up and pull over from the Linux machine and ingest into the new Windows verify instance and into the corresponding directory. Then from there, once the verify processor goes through on its next sweep, whether it's 2 or 5 minutes, it'll grab all that corresponding data, write it into the new database that has been built within the SQL Server here. And just to kind of prove a point real briefly, so we don't need to do all this manually. We can do this all through the UI. So those two corresponding databases, so Chicago DB and CubeDB are the two I just created here a couple of minutes ago. Matt test, that was from last night. But you can see here those corresponding databases were created here in the new MySQL database engine. Then it's up to us then to obviously load in historical data or at least grab new data from now moving forward with the automated billing application server param job. All right. Also, last but not least, I know I'm running a little long in the tooth here, is if you're utilizing the change management module, there's going to be corresponding, let me pull up, where's my FileZilla at? There's going to be corresponding snapshots and audit logs that are probably being written over to the old Linux guy that we'll need to pull over and ingest them into the new Windows directories for Verify. So those will be hiding underneath the installation directory, which will be the opt verify apps insight. Underneath that, they will be, they will be a snapshot directory. I don't think I have any. Okay, these are corresponding snapshots actually that are running on automation through this module here that you'll probably want to capture or copy, and pull over it and then load onto the new Windows server in the corresponding directory. So that way, if anyone needs to check and see what the settings were for the enterprise parameters, 2 weeks ago or however long these snapshots are kept, they can certainly do so. So snapshots need to be pulled over as well as the audit logs. So the audit logs, once again, let me just showcase this real briefly if I can get back to the cluster definitions that we saw earlier will be here. So these ones that we did update. So on the Windows verify install path cluster1/logs, we'll want to actually pull those RTMT audit logs off of the Linux box and pull them over and ingest them into this local path here. Now, on this Linux one here, not even sure if I have any. Let's take a quick look here. I don't believe I do. No, I don't have any audit logs. But if we are using audit logs, once again, we'll want to copy those over. But then also, lastly, for the audit logs for the Cisco environment, we'll want to make sure that we update RTMT. So if you have jobs within RTMT that are downloading audit logs to us nightly, whether they're for UCM, whether they're for Unity or for Contact Center Express, we'll want to update those jobs within RTMT, if not delete and recreate them, so that they're pointing down to the new Verify Windows instance of this .201 and the corresponding directories for them, which would be these. And then that way, then obviously we'll have everything automated for historical as well as progressing and moving forward. Okay, what else do I have here? All right, that covers the snapshots. Yeah, certainly, once again, as I had made mention, diving into the analytics section here, running some quick history searches, whether that's from the UCM or the cube varieties. I just don't have any data here at the moment. Getting a little long. But also what you can check. Now my dashboards all came over too. So all my dashboards came over in that configuration file. I don't even have any cube data, so that one's probably pretty blank. But the one that we all saw at the very beginning of this session here, where I was specifying that you cannot migrate a MySQL database into MS SQL, and a data volume widget here, but unfortunately no data because I haven't loaded any in here yet. So certainly once that historical data is loaded from a data dump or files that are just copied and pasted from one to another, certainly options are there. But as I had mentioned earlier, the contact center data, once again, we don't house. So we're reading that database in Informix, and as long as that connection is there and is solidified by Verify, the same exact widgets that I had on the Linux one are going to show up right here in the Windows one. Same layout, same specificity that I already had selected. So all of that is there for you. And then maybe just double check something like maybe your DNDID management. So if you're using DID management, did all of your configurations come over? Did all your DID sites come over? I'm 100% certain they did. Now I had 2 blocks off of that Linux lab pulled over to Windows. Here they are. There's one for San Jose and one for Chicago. So once again, if you have the DNDID inventory management module, certainly those will carry over with one of the first steps that we utilized in this session with carrying over the H2 database. All right, I think I've spoken enough here. Mike, I wouldn't say light on content, but I'm out of time. Are there any questions?
We're getting the hook. Yeah. Two quick questions from Matt. I answered them in the chat, but I think we should cover them here.
Sure.
One is, why would you want to migrate from the Linux OVA to Windows Microsoft SQL Server?
Well, that's a great question, and it's preference. It comes down to preference. Whether or not there's security measures, whether the architectures within your environment on the server team, don't want Linux servers, or they only want their Windows services or servers, excuse me. But it does come down to preference.
That's what I said. Okay, perfect. Then the second question was a follow-up. To be clear, you can migrate the config settings, but to migrate the actual database, you need some sort of dark SQL magic.
You do. You most certainly do. It can be done, but it's not going to be done by us. I'll candidly, openly say it like that.
Yes.
Because something rogue could certainly happen, and then it kind of hoses up the database, for lack of a better term, and then we wouldn't want to support something that's kind of half broken. But yes, it will be blank databases that you will be activating. There is no easy way to extract that data. However, like I made mention, you can certainly dive into Call Manager, go into the serviceability page, export the 1 or 2 months that Call Manager has within its memory banks, or like I made mention, if you can find those flat files off of the Linux server, you can certainly copy those over, or find out who can deliver that dark magic for you. But yes.
Yeah, that is my white whale. Okay, so that's it. Let me take back control. Again, great job, Matt. And we did Q&A. So I do want to remind everyone about Planet Verify, our new online community where you can connect with us and other verified users and expand your knowledge of all things Verify. So hop on over to planet.verify.com or planet.com/verify.com/planet and take a look around. But the moment we all been waiting for, to see who is the winner of our $50 Amazon gift card. The winner is Brian Alexander. Congratulations, Brian. Your account manager will be reaching out to you shortly. And next week, don't forget to join us for our next week's workshop where Victor and Dre will show off the new features in version 13. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.
Take care, all. Thank you.